Polygamy is still in the headlines. Polygamy is still fighting for legality and decriminalization. Yet the responsibility for all the children born into polygamy turns out to be a pattern of something else. Because it is currently an issue and will remain so until further court dates, I feel that it is necessary to give you an honest view inside the cause and effect of polygamy and its choices. Choice? Is polygamy a choice? Is it compared to gay marriage? Not really. In gay marriage, there are two equal partners. In polygamy, there's one alpha partner and constantly diminishing partners. And it has always been that way, because that is the nature of polygamy. According to the most comprehensive judicial studies ever done on the subject, done in the Canadian court case, worldwide, records and documentation and research on polygamy has discovered that polygamy is more harmful than it is good. Let us understand what really goes on inside of polygamy. Today we have investigative reporter Ed Casilia, who has studied and written about polygamy for years. He is the author of the book called Pligs, and he is on the other end of this fine conversation today. Please join me in welcoming Ed Casilia. And last night I watched Escaping Polygamy with the Kingston, Colleen and her sisters, and I'm so proud of them. That took a lot of courage. I'm very proud of them. So I'm thinking now, before that Colorado case comes up, is a good time to educate whatever we can get out there. They featured the Kingston group.
Yeah.
And, of course, the doctrine's the same. It's just different profits and the same losses.
The whole thing is that they are all the same bunch. I mean, it's what it is at least from what I read and what I see. And people try and differentiate it and say these are the good guys. No, it's all the same. It's like they talk about the Centennial Park group and how they're the bright ones, the enlightened ones, and I've been around those guys.
Enlightened people don't enslave people in the name of God so they can have more sex than anybody else.
No.
Period. Over and out.
I mean, we were actually at a thing at a local college when we were still in St. George one day, and they were speaking, and they have these groups that go out and try and put the positive spin on the Centennial Park bunch, and oh God, the daggers they were shooting our way. Oh man, they knew who we were, and they were not real friendly, let's say, especially when we started asking them some questions. But oh well.
Yeah.
You know how that goes.
Oh well, yes, but then part of their cloak of coverage is that they're better than anyone on earth. They don't want to expose the fact that they're the scourge of the earth because they enslave people in the name of God. It's not even honest slavery. Condemn them to hell forever if you can't enslave them.
Just because they allow them to wear regular clothing, wear modern clothing, and go to school and have jobs does not necessarily mean that they're free of the problem.
No, you're not free of the problem. And don't you notice how arrogance is always the cloak of hypocrisy?
Yeah. Well, they put a whole concentrated effort against us on our book. They had a number of people go on to Amazon.com and people who had never read the book and just start ripping it in the review section. And some of them even admitted that they didn't read one word of the book. And they're not even mentioned in the book. Not even mentioned. So, we found that rather unfair and fairly interesting, but oh well.
Well, Ed, don't you know you've committed the ultimate sin? You've actually dared to think.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
No,
I,
no,
that's the best that they don't dare think. They are total puppets.
yeah, yeah,
Total.
it's not good.
No.
But, you know, oh well.
Well, it's very sad, but that's the way they are. I get that because every once in a while somebody will really, really sabotage me and just da da da. And lots of times I'll leave it up there for a while on my YouTube side or whatnot, and just let them think they're having a heyday, and then I'll just come back with something simple and obvious and put it
Yeah,
up there for a while, and then I'll take their stuff down after a
yeah.
while. But I'll leave it there for a while because I want people to know that that's the way they act.
Well, they got very uncivil at one point with our Facebook page for the book, and I mean they even threatened Kara at one point, and so yeah, they're a nasty bunch.
Yeah, I'm not welcome around any of my family. I'm disowned because they can't control me. So this year, they sent me an invitation to a family gathering as if I'm dumb enough to go.
Yeah, really. Hey, I got a question for you. Um, what is your take? I'm just curious what you think about Winston Blackmore showing up at the Fourth of July celebration in Short Creek.
I think Winston Blackmore is going to do anything and everything that he can to cement his power through the polygamous groups. I think Winston is a little mini god and he thinks he's next. And he's not going to let go of any opportunity for more power, more money, more business connections, and more young women.
Well, it's interesting because apparently he was sidling up real close to Willie Jessup, and yeah, they got together for like an hour in a quiet place in the park down there, and we're kind of having a conversation. And I mean, Willie's going to end up with all the money, and I think Willie is going to end up with all the money intentionally to kind of continue the power and the structure of what's going on out there. I think Willie and Lyle are going to end up the top two dogs, and I think Winston is kind of kissing up, sidling up to him because of the advantage.
That is exactly it. Because Winston, look at it like this, Ed. They're little mini gods. They think that their powers, their national powers in their mind, the only ones on earth that count. All he's doing is making an alliance with a power that's got money. That's absolutely in power, and he wants to make sure his power is connected to the other guy's power. But they'll sabotage each other if they can, because that's polygamy.
Yeah, that's kind of my take. And then I also found it interesting with them building that big wall around the property down there at the same time. Because I think there's a segment out there that says, you know what, we don't like Willie and we don't like Winston and we're still Warren loyals and we don't like Lyle and we don't like what's happening. And you guys can put all this phony stuff out that you want. I wouldn't be surprised if there is another offshoot that comes out of Short Creek.
Well, there must be, because there always has been. I mean, look at history. These guys realize that all they have to do is have a revelation and a small following that they can control and enslave.
Yeah,
And look at the branches off. Ed, it's been branching and branching and branching ever since you and I were born.
yeah, yeah,
They do it because it works. The interesting thing is, no matter how far they branch off or how many there are, the leader is the only mouthpiece of God on earth, because Mormonism provides that, because they believe in an eternal, constant new prophet. So that's so easy to do and claim Mormonism is to be the prophet. And they must keep some sort of alliance so that they can have the girls. I've got relatives, female relatives, in every single polygamous cult that I know of.
yeah. Well, yeah, I know we discussed that, and it's kind of like okay, And the Pringle, South Dakota thing, man, that's gonna erupt before too long.
Yeah.
We can't really talk a whole lot about it because I don't know how much is public knowledge, but I do know that there are some things that are happening out there that are being very closely watched.
The thing that I wanted to make people understand is to the best of our ability is just to get a greater and broader education on polygamy. There is this ridiculous assumption that there's freedom in it somewhere, and there isn't.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we have noted all through this, it's coercion from cradle to grave. You're born into it. You are taught from the moment you can reason or understand words. If you don't follow the path, your salvation is at stake. You're eternally damned. You're gone. And I mean that's from the very beginning of a woman's ability to reason. That's what's drilled into her. So there is no freedom. It's coercion from the very beginning. That's why when people who say, well, whatever consenting adults do is their own business, yeah, that's fine and well. But the point is they're not consenting because they're forced into this. It's something that they are brainwashed into from the very beginning. It's not like it's a rational judgment. It's not like I decide, oh well, today's Tuesday and my day to go shopping, and I'm going to go take care of my errands, and I'm going to go do this, and it's not that kind of a decision that you make because you're aware of what's going on around you. It's a decision that's precast that you have no influence on. You have no way to break away from.
Well, even worse than that, you must live polygamy or you will lose your salvation, you will lose your family, you will lose your children, and the religion says they have a right to kill you in the basic religion teachings to save your evil soul in blood atonement to save your soul. That would be better that you would be dead than to turn away from that religion. So, the fear is there whether they kill you or not. And look at it, Ed. I was weaned on that fear. And people say, yeah, but they never did it. Yeah, but they did.
Well,
You know,
we had some of the instances of, and some of it was power struggle, of course, but some of the things that happened up in northern Utah, the Kingstons and all of that, and the LeBarons. And, I mean, there was a lot of violence attached to what was going on there, and even as Warren Jeffs was building his yearning for Zion complex in Texas, he was leaning and saying more and more about the blood atonement thing. He was starting to bring that doctrine more and more into play and in his sermons and discussions and that sort of thing. So, it maybe we're very, very fortunate. Maybe there's some very lucky people out there who wouldn't be around if Warren hadn't been picked up when he was.
that blood atonement doctrine was spoon fed to me as all my life. I got away from it by getting away from polygamy altogether. Blood atonement was as basic as plural wives.
Well, and there still are some people who were cast out of the community in Short Creek who've not been heard from, who just sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
And makes you wonder what has happened, what's going on here, where have they gone? So it's not far fetched, and they go, well, nothing happened. Well, how do we know? There are people that are gone, so who knows?
Well, it used to be when you got on Wikipedia and whatnot that they said that Ervil LeBaron killed upwards of 30 people. Now I've heard accounts that have come across the web, and I don't know where they get their information, but they say more like 40. They haven't found all the bodies. So the truth of the matter is, they don't really know.
No, no, they don't. I mean, well, it's also part of the secrecy of the cult as well. They trying to find any information out, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. I mean, it's almost impossible. Finding the truth out there is a very difficult prospect.
Well, when a child is raised that murder is okay if they disobey, such as honor killings and blood atonement, that is not faith, it's fear. That is not freedom of choice, it's terrorism.
Yeah, it's the coercion that we were talking about. From the moment you can reason, from the moment you can distinguish words, that's what you're force fed. So yeah, anybody who says that it's a free choice is out of their mind, and anybody who claims that it's a lifestyle choice is propagandizing, because it's not a lifestyle choice. It's a religious coercion, and as you say, a brand of terrorism where they're forced into this and they don't have any say.
Well, let's just take a look at it for a second, and under the assumption that it was a choice. They try to spoon feed us that it is a sexual choice of adults. It hasn't got anything to do with a sexual choice of adults. And here's why. That choice isn't available for the women. And the responsibility of that choice is not included. We have rights as citizens of this country, but there's an unspoken assumption that with the right goes the responsibility. There is no responsibility for polygamous men. They can pole vault their way to heaven on their penis, and that is done in the name of God. Sorry, but that's the head they're thinking with.
Well, there are no consequences attached to what goes on. The child deaths from the inbreeding for all the years. There's no responsibility for that. The arrogance, the flouting of the law, flaunting of the law, the thievery. There are no consequences paid out there. The only judge and jury that they've ever really had has been their prophet, whoever it may be at the time, and whichever group it may be. So I mean, and that is so unpredictable. The decision, a guy wakes up in the morning and says, and you out, you're gone. Well, why? You're apostate. You're gone. Well, but what did I do? You're just gone. You know, with no reason. So I mean, the only consequences that come due are the ones that are issued down from whoever happens to be the prophet at the time, and they're so arbitrary, and they are guided by anything but religious doctrine.
Power, it goes from the top to the bottom, and it is so blatant. For example, all of my life, without exception, I have seen polygamous men, including my father, eat better than their wives and children ever did. Each wife prepared the best she could for him when he came, and went without so that he would come back, or he would go to a wife that fed him better. I watched my father sit down to a table and eat ham and eggs and full-blown hash brown potatoes or whatever he wanted for breakfast, while the children sat at picnic tables in the same room and ate oatmeal and had no milk to put on it. I watched that.
Well, there's no sense of equality that goes on in that community. I mean, you remember, of course, one of the proclamations from Warren from his prison cell was when he put all of the women and children on a beans and water diet. I mean, there is no equality there. I'll bet you none of the men were stuck on a beans and water diet. We know darn well that didn't
No,
happen. And take a look at Willie. He hasn't missed a meal in a long time.
no, even when he should. But the
By the way,
godliness.
sorry, Willie, we love you, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm working on that kind of benevolence. I'm trying.
Little tongue in cheek there.
Yeah, yeah, we dearly love you, Willie. We just don't like the things you do. There you go.
Hope you had as much fun in hell as you had getting there.
Yeah. Well, the sad thing about it is that these men that issue these rules would never, under any circumstances, live or tolerate the way they expect their underlings to live and tolerate.
Well, no, and I mean, and you could see the pecking order. I mean, you've been in Costco and Walmart in southern Utah, and you've seen how they walk in, and here comes the male lead, and he's trailed by his various wives. or, the group of women assigned to go shopping that day, trailing behind the man leading. He may even be only a 12-year-old boy, who
Right.
knows? Um, so, it's a submissiveness of mind and body and spirit.
It's amazing to me how that indoctrination from birth about sacrifice, you're supposed to sacrifice in this life and you'll be rewarded in heaven, not this life. You must sacrifice. And if you don't, it's because you're evil. And I was told by my husband that if I didn't enjoy him bedding another woman, I was immoral. However, there was a blood covenant if I were ever to do such a thing. It wasn't applicable to him. But the whole idea of this martyrdom to sacrifice, I have found even in people that have escaped and been gone many years, it's habitually ingrained in their subconscious mind, and they really needed a psychological deprogramming. It is extremely damaging.
As reasonable people, we all make certain kinds of sacrifices in our life, whether it's because of our job, our family, our friends, or whatever. And that's not an unusual thing. But when you are pushed to a point of losing yourself, your complete identity, forfeiting your rights, being a mute dummy, if you will, um, that becomes a different matter. You once you lose yourself, that image of self, um, there's nothing left, and that's why, you know, I when I would see them in the stores, or I would be out in the community and whatever. Um, my comment used to be that they walked around with these blissed out faces, vacant, empty smiles, kind of plastered into place. It's because the image it conveyed to me was, I'm suffering inside, but it's all going to be okay because it's going to be good for me, and I'm going to be rewarded in the next life, and push out little spirit babies for the world to take care of. You know, it's like they're little robots. It's like they are empty and vacant, no, just completely void of emotion or passion or any kind of joy. And that's a very sad thing to see in another human being that you just happen to encounter, whether it's on the street or in a store or wherever. And when we talk about this fundamentalist polygamy, that's why I always try very hard to insist to people, you need to place it in the proper context of what's going on. This is not this is not something that is a willing choice. This is not something that is is a woman saying, "Okay, well, I'm in on that. Okay, fine." This is submission. This is uh, a removal of rights and human dignity. So, we could talk about adults, and we can talk about rights, and we could talk about freedoms and all. The problem is you're not starting on a level playing field, and that's where you must start if you're talking about freedom and rights. You have to start out on an equal playing field. And that way it stays right. Otherwise, if you're doing this person here is being completely neglected. They're gone. They have no rights. They've submitted them all to the other, and that's the part that is so difficult for some people to understand.
Well, back to the concept of sacrifice. True sacrificing would be getting your priorities straight and choosing what is the better all the way around. I mean, that's the art of sacrifice. But we were taught that sacrifice meant to let somebody use you, to let somebody destroy you, control you, blind obedience. blind obedience, or else. You obeyed your husband as if he was God, because he was God of the household. He could throw you out. He could not let you have food. He could do anything he wanted. He could drive your sons off, his own sons. He could just give his daughters, your daughters, our daughters, to his buddies, whatever he wanted to do, because he was God. And if you didn't accept that, you were evil. We didn't even know what sacrifice was. We thought sacrifice meant to lay down our lives in obedience without asking a question. And I mean it most literally.
Well, I mean, getting to the point you were making there, besides Warren in the Texas prison, there was one of his elders who they basically swapped daughters for spiritual marriage. You know, Warren said, "Okay, well, I like your daughter. I'm going to take her as a wife," and she was 12 years old. And the guy said, "Okay, fine." And he said, "Well, I like your daughter too." He said, "Okay, fine, you can have her." You know, one was 14 that Warren had traded for this his friend's 12-year-old daughter. You know, and it's like, wait a minute, what's
Yeah,
going on here? You
yeah.
know,
And that's holy.
yeah, not in my book.
You know, but the horrible thing about it is that the dual standard is so extreme. And we point a finger across the pond and we say all these things about polygamy and Islam, not daring to look in our own backyard and say we got exactly the same thing by another name.
Well, we've actually got it worse because it is such a small, tighter community um, without without any sense of reason behind it, and it is, yes, you're born into it in both areas, but being so completely isolated, and the existence of being in that lifestyle and the few times when you interact with the outside world, it's got to be just devastating to people, you know. But to be quite honest with you, you know, this whole concept of equality is not something that a lot of people, not only in southern Utah or in the United States, but in the world in general, it's not something they're accustomed to, especially when it comes to women and women's rights.